Hey, what's up, Logic fans? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to cover section 4.9 of the text where we discover the meaning of relations. So I'm assuming the content from section 4.8 where you learned about how to construct relational sentences. All right, let's rock. All right, Logic fans, so by now you're familiar with relations, right? And so we have constructions like this, where this might be is taller than, is the mother of, is greater than, is less than, is smarter than, is richer than, okay, is the same color as, all right? These are all relations, okay? And we can denote that this way as we learned in 4.8. Now, a couple of items of order for interest in understanding the meaning of relations and how to understand what you're looking at notationally here. So the x and the y here, these are known as the, and I did mention this on the previous video, but these are known as the relata of the relation, okay? So these are the relata, okay? And this here is known as the first relatum. So x in this case would be the first relatum, put first relatum. And then there's the second relatum, and every relation has a first and a second relatum, okay? So in this case, it's x is the first relatum, and this y here is the second relatum. If it were like this, then y would be the first relatum and x would be the second relatum. If it were like this, z would be the first relatum and x would be the second relatum. Now, if it were like this, then x is in the position of the first relatum and in the position of the second relatum. But if we talk about the first relatum, we'd be talking about this one. Okay, and if we were talking about the second relatum, we'd be talking about this one. So the place there is kind of fixed by this language, first relatum, second relatum. That's the point, all right? Now, what's interesting here is that when we're thinking about relations, we can think about them from the perspective of either relatum. So let's look at a couple of examples. So, for example, okay, if LXY is the loving relation, meaning X loves Y. In this case, we're looking at it from the perspective of the first relatum, okay? So we're looking at it from the perspective of this guy, and we're saying it's this thing that's loving this thing. Okay, the first thing is doing the loving, the second thing is receiving the loving, okay? So you know, it's this thing that bears the relation L to the thing Y, all right? And notice, just because X bears the relation L to the thing Y, it does not automatically thereby follow that Y bears the relation L to X. That is to say, it's not necessarily the case that Y loves X, okay? However, we can also state this relationship not just from the perspective of the first relatum. We can state the same thing from the perspective of the second relatum. We can say Y is loved by X, okay? So LXY here can be read in either of these two ways, right? And this is generally follows for just about any relation, okay? We can think about them from one of two perspectives. If we think about it from the perspective of the first relatum, then we say X loves Y. If we're thinking about the relationship from the perspective of the second thing, then we're saying Y is loved by X, okay? Similarly, let's try another one, all right? Let's try this one. So let's do CYZ, okay? Where this stands for Y cause or causes Z. Okay. Now this is clearly given from the perspective of the first relatum. Okay. So my question for you is what then would be the same relationship expressed from the point of view of the second relatum from that perspective? How would you say it here? Okay, so it would be Z is caused by Y. Okay. Now, basically you can do this for any relation. Okay. For some relations, it's a little bit awkward what looking at it from the position of the second relatum would be. So, for example, let's suppose we had I don't know, MXY, where that meant X is the mother of Y. Okay, you know, naturally we don't normally turn around and say Y is mothered by Y or by X, okay? Although that's a perfectly fine way of saying it. Like, we can produce that construction, but instead of saying X is the mother of Y, we normally don't turn around and say Y is mothered by X, right? If we're looking at it from the position, from the perspective of the thing in the second relatum, okay? Instead, we would just say something like Y is a child of x or something like that, right? And that doesn't quite get it because y is a child of x could be true if x is the father. But we might say, you know, y was birthed by x or something like that, okay? The point is that we can always look at a relation from the perspective of the thing in the first position, or we can look at it from the from the perspective of the thing in the second position, although sometimes it gets a little awkward to talk that way. Normally what we do is we reach for a different relation. So like if txy means x is taller than y, okay, we wouldn't normally say y is taller by x or whatever, okay? That's just a weird construction. But we could form such constructions, and we can look at this from the perspective of y rather than the perspective of x. It's just that normally we usually jump to a different relation. So instead of saying y is taller than by y or something like that, we would say y is shorter than x, right? We would naturally just jump to a different relation, okay? Is the idea. But I do want to insist that, you know, you can look at these relations from the perspective of either relatum, okay? All right. So let's try a couple exercises and make sure you're getting the point here. All right. So in this case, go ahead and translate what this sentence means, right? We're talking about the meaning of relations. What does it mean if you translate it from the first relatum's perspective, and if you translate it from the second relatum's perspective, how would you say it? Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to pause and think this through, but, you know, with respect to A, you would just be saying, well, okay, this means A loves B, all right? And if we were looking at it from the perspective of B, we would be saying B is loved by A. That's what B is doing, right? If A is loving B, then in that same instance, what's B doing? Well, B's being loved by A. That's what B's doing, okay? So that's how we want to do it. Let's look at some more here. If I said instead of LAB, if I said LBA, okay, how would you translate that? Okay, so this would say B loves A now, right? Because it's this thing in this position that's doing, you know, L to A. This is receiving L from B, okay? So this would say A is loved by B, right? And these express the same idea. They express this sentence right here, okay? So it matters what's in what position, okay? Is it the first relatum or the second relatum that we're looking at? Okay, let's try a couple of others. So this time I've got three different relations. I got the loving relation, the causing relation, and I've got the mother relation, okay? So translate what this means, right? What does a sentence like this mean? Notice these are not sentences. You could not build these from 4.8, right? You have to have individual constants in here. So this is not a sentence. This is the form of a sentence. It's the form of, you know, this sentence and many of the others we're going to look at. So what does this sentence mean in ordinary English? Okay, pause now. All right, so this just means, right, that A loves A. Alternatively, you could say A loves herself or himself, okay? That's what that sentence means. A loves A, okay? Let's try another one. What about this sentence? What's this mean? So this means that B causes B, or B causes itself. B is self-caused, I guess you could put it that way. Right? B caused itself. You might wonder whether it's possible for something to cause itself or not. It's an interesting metaphysical question. Take a course in metaphysics where you discuss these kinds of issues. But that's what the sentence means, okay? That's absolutely what it means. Let's try some more. What's this one mean? This means G is the mother of G, or G is her own mother. Okay, you could think of it that way. Right, G is the mother of G. Okay, that's exactly what that means. All right, so let's keep going here. This here is not a sentence, but we could talk about intuitively, right? What the idea here is supposed to be is that, okay, If this is the loving relation, then this is the loving oneself relation. Okay? Similarly, this is the causing oneself relation. Right? Self-caused relation. This is the mother of oneself relation. Okay? That's exactly what the idea is supposed to be here. Okay, so we're sort of slowly building up here, all right, and we're sort of sneaking up on some of these different ideas. Let's try a slightly different exercise. Let's say that, let's just use the loving relation, simple example of a relation. Now let's suppose you had one individual thing, A, that you're talking about, little a, okay, so that's an individual constant. Now, how many possible sentences can you form from this relation and this individual constant using nothing else? Well, the answer is 1, right? All you can form is LAA, right? A loves himself. A loves A. That's the only thing. That's the only possible sentence you could form. What if you had 2, right? What if you had 2? What if you had the individual constant A and the individual constant B? How many possible relational sentences could you form from these 2 individual constants and this relation and nothing else? Okay, well, instead of just 1, now all of a sudden you can form 4. Okay, so you've got A loves himself and you've got A loves B, but you've also got B loves A and B loves himself. Okay, so this is 4 possible sentences now that you've got 2. All right. What if you had 3? How many possible sentences could you form? Pause now. Okay, so the way we're going to do this, all right, is pretty straightforward. We're just going to add the cases, right, for the C case, and then you're going to have LCA, LCB, and LCC. All right, so in this case, when you have 3, there actually turns out to be 9. What if there were 4, A, B, C, and D? How many different sentences could you make now? All right, so hopefully you are pausing and thinking this through for yourself, right? But it would be LAD, here you would have LBD, here you would have LCD, and here you would have LDA, LDB, LDC, and LDD, okay? So in this particular case, it turns out there's 16. All right, so final question. Suppose you had N of these. So you had A all the way up to and including N total, and where this is an arbitrary number here, okay? So how many, what's your general formula for computing how many possible sentences there are is the question. Pause now. Okay, so look, one way of thinking this through is just to chart all of your evidence, right? And hopefully building the table the way I did made some sense to you. But basically what we can do is we can say, okay, look, when there was one individual object, okay, how many were there? Well, there was one sentence, LAA. When there were 2, A and B, how many did there turn out to be? 4. When there were 3, there turned out to be 9, all right? And when there were 4, there turned out to be 16, right? And so the question is if there's N, how many are there possible? Well, this is perfect squares, right? So the general formula for computing this is N squared. So let's get that on the board. So given N individual constants, right, you can determine how many sentences you can make with a particular relational constant by applying this formula, N squared, okay? All right, let's spill on to the next video where we're going to continue understanding the meaning of relations. Lots to unpack today.